They are echo in eternity. Every moment of surrender, every act of unseen obedience builds a foundation of trust that no storm can destroy. Faith that moves mountains is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is the simple act of staying faithful one more day, believing that God sees even when no one else does. Faith also reshapes how we see time. We are so often in a hurry for things to happen. We pray and expect immediate answers. But God, in His wisdom, often works slowly, deeply, and beneath the surface. It's easy to believe when answers come quickly, but when the waiting stretches on, that's when faith must rise. Delayed answers are not delayed, but faith teaches us to trust not just in God's power, but in His timing. What feels like silence may actually be preparation. What seems like delay may be God building something better than we imagined. Faith whispers, don't give up. He's still working even now. Faith isn't passive. It doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. True faith is active. It involves stepping out even when we don't see the full picture. Think of the person who steps into a calling they don't feel ready for, or the one who gives sacrificially without knowing how their needs will be met. These are not reckless acts. They are acts rooted in trust that God is who He says He is. Faith may not come with guarantees, but it does come with a promise that we will never walk alone. And that promise, that presence, is enough. When we live with that awareness, even our small steps become bold declarations of belief. Faith also means holding on when the world says, let go. People may not understand why you're still believing. They may tell you to be realistic, to move on, to stop hoping. But real faith isn't always logical. It's not driven by statistics or predictions. It's rooted in relationship. It says, I trust you, God, because I know you. And that trust, it's the kind of faith that builds legacies, changes generations, and speaks volumes without ever needing to shout. When others give up, the person of faith stands firm, not because they're strong, but because they know the one who is. There is something sacred about trusting God in the middle of unanswered prayers. It is in that space between the cry for help and the response from heaven that real faith is forged, because faith is not about getting what we want. It's about knowing who He is, even when we don't get what we ask for. In the waiting, our character is shaped. In the longing, our hearts are refined. And though it feels like loss, we are gaining something eternal, a trust that no circumstance can shake. Sometimes the mountain that needs to be moved is not external at all. It's internal. It's fear, pride, bitterness, control. We ask God to change our situation, but He begins by changing our hearts. We think the obstacle is outside, but He sees deeper. And as painful as that can be, it is also one of the most beautiful acts of love. But God sees them, and He is patient, persistent, and kind. Faith means letting Him do that work even when it hurts. It means saying, yes, God, I trust you even here, even now. Faith is not an escape from reality. It is an anchor within it. Life will bring storms. We will face things we never expected. But faith gives us something unshakable to hold on to. Not a guarantee that we won't suffer, but a promise that we won't be alone. And that changes everything. The storm may rage, but we are not without hope. The mountain may tower above us, but we are not without strength, because the one who is with us is greater than anything that stands against us. And when we begin to see Him more clearly than we see our problems, the mountain begins to lose its power. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines us. The stories that inspire us most aren't the ones where everything goes perfectly. They are the ones where people kept going despite everything falling apart. Stories of quiet strength, unwavering hope, and relentless belief. That's what faith really looks like. It's not about always feeling certain. It's about choosing to believe anyway. It's about waking up, facing the same challenge again, and deciding that today, once more, you will trust. These are the moments that move heaven. These are the prayers that shake eternity. We may never see the full impact of our faith, but that doesn't mean it's wasted. Every step forward, every act of love, every whispered prayer, it all matters. It all moves something, even if we can't yet see it. Faith that moves mountains begins in stillness. It begins in the quiet moments when we choose to be with God, not for answers, but for His presence. It grows in the secret places, in worship, in prayer, in surrender. And from there it begins to shape how we live. We begin to see differently, act differently, not because we've mastered faith, but because faith has begun to master us, and the world notices. Not always in big ways, but in subtle shifts, in kindness where there was once hardness, in hope where there was once despair, in peace where there was once anxiety. This is how mountains move. One moment, one decision, one act of trust at a time. Sometimes the greatest faith is found not in the leap, but in the waiting. We tend to celebrate bold action, and rightly so, but there is also boldness in standing still, in remaining where God has placed us, even when we long to run. Waiting requires strength. It requires the courage to hold on to hope without seeing any evidence that it's working. But it is in that holding, that trusting without proof, that faith becomes something deep and enduring. Mountains don't always move in response to our pace. Sometimes they move when we've been still long enough to understand that it wasn't the mountain that needed to shift, it was our perspective. Stillness doesn't mean stagnation, it means resting in God's timing with full confidence. Faith always leads us toward love. The more we trust God, the more we become like Him, and His nature is love, pure, sacrificial, and selfless. So when we grow in faith, we grow in compassion. We begin to see people not as obstacles or annoyances, but it overflows into action. It feeds the hungry. It comforts the broken. It listens, forgives, and gives without counting the cost. A life of faith becomes a life of love, and in that love, God's power is revealed more clearly than in any dramatic